There's death, there's destruction.
Global news impacts us.
We have to change the way we live. This is why we need independent media.
Cheers and salutations. Welcome to our program. My name is Kit Cabell. I'm the host of Hard Lens Media. And on our show, we're always happy to give a platform for people speaking truth to power, especially when it comes down to calling out the madness that is the prison industrial complex. For those of you who don't know, or to our international audience, if you're unaware, the United States is number one. No, not in healthcare, not in taking care of its citizens, but number one in having the most incarcerated people in the free world. And yet we are the bastion of democracy. And the thing is, now more than ever, we have to challenge this system and break it apart. It's been severely impacting numerous lives, especially amongst the Black and Latino communities here in the United States. And there's many factors to play into it. One, we have a corrupt neoliberal system that favors profits over people. We have a prison industrial complex that is constantly consuming communities and destroying families. And we have this madness known as the war on drugs. No, it's not going to, there's never going to be a victory. It's going to end up the same way. It's going to be remembered the same way as prohibition. So joining me here is an outstanding activist. We've seen her host on The Hill as well. She speaks truth to power. Give it up for Olayemi Olurin. Thank you so much for joining us on our show. I hope I said your name correctly.
Olayemi, but don't worry about it. Just call me Olay.
Okay, well, I do apologize for that. So thank you so much. I know that we were going to try and have you on our show last week, but obviously so many things are happening, and we're really happy to have you on our show. So for our viewers and subscribers, you know, you've been speaking out against this prison industrial complex that we have, mass incarceration, reformative justice, but yet on social media, there are always those who say, well, you're talking about reformative justice. Are you talking about abolishing all prisons? Are you talking about madness on the street? There's going to be purge laws, or there's going to be purging happening. I guess too many people watch the film Purge. For our viewers, can you at least enlighten us about reformative justice and what does that mean, especially when it comes down to, again, ending this system that feeds on people and destroys communities?
Well, okay, so I'm an abolitionist first and foremost above everything. My ultimate goal is to have this system that we currently exist in abolished altogether. But I recognize that that's not going to happen in one foul swoop. They're not going to just open up all the prisons, close all the courts. But what abolition is a vision of tomorrow. It's this idea that we have divested from this current world, and instead of continuing to put our money into policing and prisons and expanding mass incarceration, we put that into actually addressing the root causes of crime, which is poverty, and actually giving the most under-resourced communities amongst us what they need. That being said, how I see reformative justice, I see a bail reform and the different initiatives are means to that end, right? Like in order to get us there, we have to decarcerate, and this has to happen brick by brick, that we continue to break down and dismantle this system. So that's how I see it. The current reformative justice for me is, all right, let's get bail reform. Let's successfully pass and defend bail reform so that as we are able to decarcerate all these pretrial detention centers, abolish cash bail, we are lowering these prison populations, and we are moving us towards this abolitionist future.
Now, the thing is, though, what we do see, though, especially with the aftermath of what happened to George Floyd, we're still seeing young Black people still getting killed by the police. We're still seeing, and I hope I'm saying their names correctly here. I want to bring up something that happened 5 months ago. A gentleman named Jalen Walker was shot 60 times over a simple traffic stop. And it's not only that, we've seen other videos just as nightmarish as a simple traffic stop happening, or either that when a 15-year-old girl 2 months ago, I believe, according to my notes, her name was Savannah Grazino. She was killed while running to the police for help. Officers blamed, and from that story, the officers were blaming the victim. How do we, I think one of the question is now is, since we have a lot of inaction from Washington, D.C., and we have politicians that like to just capitalize on these tragedies, especially when it's election season, how can people actually get reformative justice and accountability, police accountability, when for the most part, our elected officials are still blind to the terror that's still happening?
Well, first of all, I think the first thing I would say is our elected officials are not blind. There's a mistake we make with assuming awareness is for the politicians and awareness is for the powers that be. The powers that be in the institutions that maintain the system we live in know that it's like that. It's not the judges, the prosecutors, and the legislators that need to be informed about what's happening in Rikers. They know, they actively are made aware that it's not just that they don't care, it's that that's the purpose, that's the point, right? So it's not that they don't know. The whole purpose in awareness and these initiatives and trying to get somebody to care and to not be blind is the public. The politicians and the people who have power will do what the public galvanizes around them to do, because that's how they, create and maintain power, which is why we've, created a society and media that fosters this tough on crime narrative, because it's the narrative and agenda that they would like, and they need us to be invested in that so that they could continue to maintain power and do that. So that's why what we're trying to do is show the public, hey, actually, all these things you've been educated around and to believe about prison and policing and mass incarceration are not so. And to the larger point, I think it's easy to get disenchanted or dissuaded with the movement when you look at it from 2020 summer to now. And I think that's a mistake a lot of people make. Like, there are no new pains. There's nothing that happened to George Floyd that has not been happening to Black people in this country that has long before we had George Floyd, we had Elijah McClain, we had Sean Bell. We've had so many of these people, right? So it's the reality of, how do we change the conversation? And instead of trying to galvanize around the emotions and the sympathies of people it's not hard to get a lot of people to say, hey, what I see happening to George Floyd, that's wrong. What's hard is to get them to understand the system and all the different things they support, like putting over policing certain neighborhoods, punishing people a certain level of impoverishment. It's hard to get them to see the link between that and to oppose that. So what we're now trying to do is, hey, let's take the conversation back further. And instead of just trying to get people galvanized around, hey, can you lock up that one particular cop? Let me show you how the different steps, the different things that you support about your system led to that officer even being present in that neighborhood for that to happen. So that's how I see it, is looking back at a picture. And if you think about it like that, you realize that we are actually making progress, because before we were never having those conversations. So like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, we were still wrapped up in fighting about what Black Lives Matter even means as a slogan. At least now we're starting to have the larger conversations like, hey, actually, bail reform, all these different things. Police shouldn't be responding to traffic call. They shouldn't be responding to wellness. We finally actually gotten into a conversation about actually different alternatives and different things we could do to avoid these outcomes. So I would say that we're making progress.
Now, one of the things that corporate media gets wrong is they say that, well, when it comes down to impoverished communities, especially in cities like Chicago, New York City, LA, they're always quick to dismiss, like, well, those neighborhoods have always been that way, or they've always been run down. But there's a lot of factors that has caused this system, especially the prison industrial complex, to capitalize on the misfortune of working class communities, especially with gentrification, a homelessness crisis. We have an opioid crisis here in America. We have unchecked police corruption. What does this overall do to the mental health of so many people who are just struggling in communities? Like, take, for example, in my city, Chicago, on the south and west side, Chicago is a hyper-segregated city, and I don't care what Fox News might call it a socialist paradise. It is not. It is a neoliberal corporatist nightmare. And I still laugh when they say Democrats from Chicago are socialists and communists. And anyways, different subject altogether. But if you look at the neighborhoods on the south and west side here in Chicago, you have gentrification running amok. You have public schools being shut down, mental health facilities being shut down. Rahm Emanuel, the previous mayor before Lightfoot took over, he shut down 54 Chicago public schools and half the mental health facilities here. His successor, Lightfoot, hasn't done anything to change the entire environment. And again, we now have unchecked corruption, police brutality, and we're seeing again communities being disenfranchised.
Yeah.
What is this? So from your perspective, because you've been doing a lot of work, especially on the ground and reporting on this, what does this do to the mental health of so many families that are just struggling in a system that is designed to keep everyone down?
So here's the first thing I would say. I would say that it isn't even just how the system helps create or helps keep certain communities impoverished. It's how it created the circumstances in and of itself, because that's what it did. It carved out particular communities. When we didn't always have a prison industrial complex. We didn't always have this massive mass incarceration system. We made a policy choice at a particular time in America's history. Like, all right, a policy determination to over police certain neighborhoods, to punish certain things with incarceration and policing that we otherwise wouldn't have. So we know what we're doing. We've preyed on particular populations. And when I say with the mental health issues, most people in the system, most people in the systems are struggling, not even just with mental health issues, but what statistically they found to be identified as serious mental health issues. And it's because not only anybody who's been poor knows that poverty is expensive. And you also know that if anybody has ever been through depression, been through any of the worst seasons of your life, you know it usually coincides with hardship and being down like that. So if you're already being born to communities that already have been impoverished communities literally for decades and decades and generations, and the people in your community are saddled with criminal convictions that prevent them from ever getting employment, certain kinds of employment, housing, access to certain resources. And then it's not just the fact people love to say, you do the crime, you do the time, but there's no such thing as that, because what you also get on top of being incarcerated, on top of all of the psychological ramifications of that and being put in prisons and what comes with fighting off all of these different social ills, you also get fined. You get fines and fees. Like, the incarcerated people in America are in more than $27 billion in debt collectively. And that's not the billions of dollars in debt their families and loved ones and the homelessness that's brought about from those criminal convictions. So I would say it's not just even that the criminal system is keeping people down, it's that it created the circumstances for them to be down and has ensured that they can literally never escape these cycles of poverty.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, when we covered, and this is something that we did a while back in 2018, my colleague Daniel Upker and myself, in 2018, we covered this story, the Exoneration Project. 16 Black men were exonerated for crimes they didn't commit because of the actions of 4 corrupt Chicago police officers who were, again, took away most of their lives, putting false charges on them. And that was just only scratching the surface. And it's still shocking knowing that it's still going on.
Yeah.
And that there are many people who are behind bars. It's just not only in Chicago, this is a nationwide problem. Many people who are behind bars for nonviolent offenses, especially holding cannabis. And let's face it, here in Illinois, it is legal for recreational use. But it's still in neighboring states, though, it's the kiss of death. And somebody just holding a gram of weed is put behind bars for a ridiculous amount of time. So I do want to get your opinion on the war on drugs and how it's been used to really be a weapon against poor people.
I mean, here's the thing. The funny thing about certain things, when you call mass incarceration slavery, when you say that the war on drugs is a war on Black people, people think that you're being hyperbolic or you're making comparisons or you're trying to say something is adjacent to that. But that's literally explicitly what it is. That's been proved at this point. There are quite literally quotes from former presidents saying that is exactly what the intention is, and that's clear. And I wanna make this point. America sensationalizes crime in a way that makes its populace completely unaware of what's in its system. The vast majority, all you ever hear about in this country is violent crime, but over 80% of everything in the criminal system is a misdemeanor, is a non-violent crime, or is a traffic offense, right? Like, that's something people aren't taking into consideration. And America has no real presumption of innocence. Of the 2 million people that are incarcerated in this country, 400,000 of them are waiting pre-trial. So they have literally not been convicted of anything, haven't had anything, but they're out there serving time. So drugs, in keeping with that, like, let's think about this, right? Despite the fact that we live in a current present day society where drugs, especially weed in specific, and these kinds of drugs are very socially acceptable. You see them in movies, all is super bad and XYZ. Then you take like Dijon Kizzy, a young black man that was killed 2 years ago in Texas, riding a bike. They say as we shoot him and kill him. These are the kinds of things that are still happening. And so the war on drugs has always been a euphemism to describe what it obviously and has clearly been since day one. It's just a means to use the criminal system against Black people. Because nonetheless, when you see areas where they have, opioid crises, like in Ohio, like I lived in Athens, Ohio, before I ever moved to New York, Appalachia, where they have a massive problem with these kinds of drugs, but it's framed then as an opioid crisis. That's the conversation and that's the language with which you hear about it. But when you hear about it in terms of cities like New York City or places where there are Black and brown people, the entire rhetoric becomes different for this level of derelict and fear and how they try to incite fear. But they don't talk about it like that when they're talking about areas with opioid crises.
I'm glad you brought that up because I thought it just clicked in my mind about a story that I heard, I believe in 2014 or sometime in 2015. Either it was in New York City or in Chicago, in one of the more affluent neighborhoods. In Chicago, there's obviously the Gold Coast and some of the upper neighborhoods on the north side. I'm not too familiar with any kind of affluent neighborhoods in New York City, but there was an incident. There was an incident where the police raided a home in one of these rich neighborhoods, or one of these rich apartments, and there was a lot of crack and cocaine there. And in it, the police report, how he defined it is, it was a sad house. And I remember reading the article, the comment section below says, no, that's not a sad house. You call that a crack house.
Yes.
But there's always that double standard.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Language is very important. There's a reason that language is so important. It's interesting that we live in a world of people constantly trying to downplay and dismiss it, but language is the most important thing there is. There's a reason why whenever, an officer kills somebody, they say officer involved shooting. They start using all these words to distance themselves from it. How you frame everything, being a lawyer, and that's something you realize, everything has to do with how you present the case, what words you use, whether or not I call my client intentionally. I'm never going to use the words defendant because that paints a certain image. You would never use inmate. You would never use these kinds of words. I'm going to use my client's name. I'm going to humanize this person. So all of that is absolutely intentional. Like, let's talk about it this way. Let's couch it this way.
So one other thing too, I want to bring up, and that is obviously, I want to bring up somebody who you will not call a friend. You've been very critical of Eric Adams.
Eric Adams. I knew it.
I'm so sorry. I had to bring it up. I obviously I follow you on Twitter. I do love your posts. When it comes down to Eric Adams, who would you be on a bus? The one video.
Yes.
I won't spoil this anyway. Would you be on a bus ride with Eric Adams or have dinner with Trump? I like the answer. If you're on a bus with Eric Adams, where is that bus going?
Right.
Because you're not going to know. So for some of our viewing audience who may not be aware of what's happening in New York City, he's going after Eric Adams has been destroying homeless encampments. Obviously, the price of renting an apartment in New York City is becoming, it's astronomical is a kind word to use. It's in another galaxy at this point. And then, of course, there is this ongoing situation happening at Rikers Island.
Yes.
Can you please enlighten us about what's actually happening there with Eric Adams and how he's been contributing to this nightmare that you've been talking about?
Yeah. So Eric Adams is the bane of my existence. And let me try to give you a synthesized version as to why. So Rikers is obviously infamous. Rikers has been a problem before Eric Adams ever came into office. So Rikers is a infamous pretrial detention center that's been open in New York City since 1932. It first really got its attention for being this hellhole that it is around the story of Khalif Browder receiving national attention, who was a 16-year-old who was wrongly accused of stealing a backpack, and he was placed on Rikers Island for years, where he was in solitary confinement. And even after finally released, he never really escaped the psychological ramifications of that experience, and he took his own life. That launched the campaign to close Rikers. So they put Rikers on a schedule. Rikers is, said and planned to be closing by 2026. Under de Blasio, what they want to do is close Rikers and replace it with 4 new jails, which is a problem in and of itself, a whole nother issue to address. But they said, okay, there are going to be delays. They don't think Rikers is going to close till 2027. A part of the plan to get Rikers closed and to decarcerate it was bail reform. Let's actually bring the plan was to get the Rikers down to 3,300 people, which Rikers is a facility only built to hold 3,000 people in the first place. So 3,300 would still make it well over capacity. But now, currently, Rikers has more than 5,000 people that are incarcerated in the facility that does not have space for them. So if you see in the pictures, you would see it as horrific. People are literally being stacked on top of each other. They are not being taken to the bathroom. People sitting in their feces, being locked up in shower stalls that are being used as cells. It is an absolute travesty. So last year, Rikers reached 16 deaths, which was the largest death toll since 2013. And they found that this is a human rights crisis. Before Eric Adams took office, he said, all right, Rikers, 100% Rikers needs systemic change. It is out of control. I support the plan to close Rikers. The minute he gets into office, no such a support has come into play. Instead, he has fought bail reform tooth and nail. He has galvanized a lot of these unfounded ideas of crime hysteria and crime waves in New York City, which caused support for bail reform to wane. It also is what made the elections, Zeldin, who competed, the Republican, in a traditionally blue place. It's supposed to be a blue blowout. Hochul was this close, just by the skin of her teeth, barely beat Zeldin, who was able to invoke Eric Adams his own self on the campaign trail. So since Eric Adams has taken office, what has actually happened now is we are at 18 deaths. So over last year's death toll in the year is not finished. Rikers has been under federal monitor already for 6 years. There is a judge, Judge T. Swain, who was appointed a monitor, and that monitor comes in. They do periodic updates to see whether or not Rikers has actually followed any of the judicial mandates or in constitutional compliance. At each and every update, they found that it is woefully not done so. Earlier this year, and about May, they found that they'd already missed over 12,000 medical appointments of taking incarcerated people. The deaths continue to mount. And so what we've been pushing for is a federal receivership. A federal receivership does not mean what it sounds like. It does not mean the federal government would take over Rikers. What it means is that the court would appoint a nonpartisan expert. Both sides would agree on a nonpartisan expert who would come in. They would be given wide latitude power for a temporary period of time to bring Rikers up to constitutional standards and compliances. And once that happens, it would automatically revert back to the state municipalities. But Eric Adams is opposed to that tooth and nail. He don't want Rikers closed. He don't want it decarcerated. He don't want no bail reform. He does not want no receivership. And deaths continue to mount. And that is where we are at present day.
Oh, Eric Adams sounds like my mayor here in Chicago. Ran in, gets into office, and sadly,
did you see when they linked up? Did you see when they kicked it?
Oh no!
Did you miss that?
I might have missed it. I've been working on a lot of projects. Can you enlighten me? What happened?
You must have not missed the evil in the sky when Eric Adams and Lori Lightfoot linked up. They had a little weekend where they linked up. Yes. They were out here being villains. Yes, a dynamic duo of villainry. I'm gonna show it to you. I'm gonna find you the pics.
God damn it! All right, I'm sorry. For those of you who don't know, this is my personal opinion. We'll get right back to the interview, but my personal opinion is this city, my city, known as Chicago, we will not survive another 4 years under Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Again,
I gotta get rid of her.
Unchecked police corruption. She's completely thin-skinned. She lacks any kind of foresight and is unable to take any kind of criticism whatsoever. I've never seen a mayor act more childish in my life. If anything, I would describe her as a dime store version of Michael Scott from The Office. Okay, she does those costumes. No. She dressed as the Rona Destroyer, and then as I think as had a cowboy, the census cowboy or something like that.
If she was purely parody, she would be so funny. My best friend loves her. She'd be so funny as memes. Like if she were like purely jokes, like she's so funny. Her little suit, she'd be dressed like a little villain from the Little Rascals. She would be hilarious if she weren't dead ass. As a city is burning, as a city is struggling, as the people are being left behind here, we have a mayor that even on the first day, because we actually covered this, we have another YouTube channel called Chicago Corner that's dedicated to covering Chicago politics. We covered the mayoral candidates that were handing in petitions, so they can get on the ballot. Lightfoot didn't show up. She showed up the week afterwards, which is odd for an incumbent mayor not to do that on the first day. Now. I feel for you.
Please help. Like, look. Hey, listen. If I'll pay anyone to help us get her out of office. She ran on change, and during 2019, we had like 21 candidates. Obviously, the primary took away most of the 20 candidates, and it was down to Lightfoot and Prepwinkle. Prepwinkle was her own worst enemy.
Lightfoot and Prepwinkle. That is hilarious. At them's your options.
Well, those were our options. And Lightfoot won with an overwhelming landslide. She had the love of the people. She got the north side to turn out to vote for her. Willie Wilson was able to get her the south side. And since then,
and she's the ops. She's very bad. Like she's very bad.
Rahm Emanuel 2.0. And with the shooting of Adam Toledo, when
oh my God, she handled that terribly in the protest.
Yes, I saw the video. I saw the video myself. What happened to that young boy?
Yep.
When he was gunned down in that alley.
Yep.
Her words were, well, she more or less said, I don't know what people will see. Or no. What people saw was a young boy get shot in the back. He didn't have the gun in his hand.
An enemy of the she honestly, I think, but the funny thing is these people kind of expose themselves, and I hope so. I feel like Lori Lightfoot, I feel like seems like the tides, like people realize and see it now, like not initially, but I think from 2020 to now, they have to see it, right? No, is that not the sense you get?
Uh, unfortunately, in Chicago, and I think most of my viewing audience can agree with this too, a lot of people are burnt out by electoral politics.
That's fair.
A lot of people have been burnt out with how everything turned out in 2016 and in 2020. Any kind of real accountability, any kind of hope from the progressive movement. I mean, we're very critical of the Democrats here on our show. I mean, I know what to expect from Republican lawmakers. I know that they'll tell me the truth when they say they'll never fight for Medicare for all or student debt forgiveness.
Right.
I know
that they'll tell you they will and don't do it.
And then they won't do it. They'll put on this mask of neoliberalism. And when it comes down to Chicago politics specifically, this is the home of an efficient democratic machine. And when I say efficient democratic machine, I'm not giving it praise. It's just, it's been around for a very long time, started by Old Man Daley. Absolutely. And you have a lot of people that just don't care. This city has been, if you look at our ward map, it is like somebody designed a jigsaw puzzle out of hell. In the wards, people are not properly represented. Yeah. People don't know who their alderman is. And, when we covered the 2019 election, when we were a smaller channel and when Chicago Corner was just starting in its infancy, everyone I was interviewing on the street was all saying the same thing. Oh, it's an election year? 2019 is our election year. Who's running for mayor? And we're a big major metropolitan city.
Yeah.
A lot of people are tone deaf or burnt out or just don't care at all. And what I have to say about this election, I'm not going to say it's the most important one, but it's a significant one so we can get out somebody like Lightfoot. Yeah. She has to be elected out of office. And there's two candidates that do stand out in my mind, but they're going to have to make their presence known in order to get her out of office. Because if she is reelected, she has corporate donors backing her up. She does have a war chest supporting her, but she has so many scandals surrounding her administration. It is something that I dread to see. I really don't want to see Lightfoot get reelected. It would be a death blow to the city.
If it's any consolation, y'all did just successfully defend against the pushbacks to bail reform, to the Pretrial Fairness Act, which is a feat.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I remember when we were actually covering that, I believe 2017, 2018, we were in the field covering protests and activist groups that were calling for bail reform here in Chicago, especially by the Cook County prisons on California Street.
Yeah.
And, you hear the stories there, and a lot of the people who are incarcerated, especially in that facility, nonviolent offenders.
Yes, absolutely.
Nonviolent offenders, or either that, especially when we covered that. Oh my goodness, why am I? The Exoneration Project, where those 16 men were exonerated for crimes they didn't commit. Another sad factor that we have to add in there is that there are people behind bars for crimes that they did not commit.
Yeah,
that's another underlying issue that hasn't been addressed by Lightfoot's administration or by Governor J.B. Pritzker.
Yeah, absolutely. But listen, and that's the thing, right? But at the very least, I will say this: in places like Chicago and New York, LA, everywhere that tries to get any level of like modest bail reform, any kind of progressive criminal justice reform, I don't use justice, but any level of these initiatives pass, immediately you have to deal with a campaign to get it rolled back before it even goes into effect with all these lies and fear mongering. And I think I've seen the fiercest of that. I've seen that in Chicago come out full force with the way that they branded it, the Pretrial Fairness Act, as the purge law. They came out in massive ways. So I would say it is an incredible feat that y'all were able to maintain that and save that, and whatever role any of us, did on trying to educate people and debunk on that. But I'm glad, I'm really glad to see days ago y'all were able to maintain that, and that's going to go into effect in January and hopefully do something about these mounting deaths in Cook County. Because I want to say that as much as we talk about what's happening in Rikers, what's happening in Cook County, what's happening in Harris County, the same, if not worse. Like the deaths are literally the same. The conditions are there. I think they even are on average in Cook County spend more time in Cook County jail before they get a trial than even at Rikers. So it's amazing to see y'all get rid of this cash bail system come January.
Well, that was the work of a lot of great activists. I know that we covered that when it was still just a dream and it was still considered taboo to talk about, because this is 2017, 2018. People were still saying, well, that doesn't sound like a good idea. That's going to be that's going to cause more problems. And since then, what I find interesting, and maybe I'm returning back to it, that talking point of, and you actually brought this up in one of your videos. People are saying, well, I guess Chicago and New York City are going to become like The Purge.
Right.
I freaking hate that movie so much.
Yes.
I'm
too.
sorry. The first one, okay, fine. But now everyone's saying it's going to be a purge this and purge that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they don't understand it. It also makes no sense. Like, they're trying to say it makes no sense. Like, especially in the context of bail, it literally makes no effing sense. Like, that's just it's illogical, but what it's supposed to do is just be alarmist and suggest anarchy. And also, I would love for people to stop. And obviously they do it intentionally, but I would love for people to stop pretending as though people that find themselves in the criminal system, or people that are being arrested, or people that are being incarcerated, are at home plotting and planning crime with awareness of the laws and the bail reform and the standards and stuff. And they're like, woo, good bail law, time to commit crime. That's not what's going down. People have no clue. People, first of all, anybody who meet at arraignments is terrified that they are going to jail. But people are the average thing that's in your criminal system. People are not committing crime because they want to. People are not doing things, or people are not being accused of doing anything or whatever because they want to be there. So this idea that that's what it is, and everybody is a scholar, and anybody but the lawyers and the activists and all the people that are stoking fear know anything about the bail laws is absurd. Please, we have to stop the madness. Like, your average person, the thing that people don't talk about is the average American lives check to check. The average American does not have the time to be actively paying attention to every little minutia law, everything. That's why we're consumers. That's why we trust the media. That's why we do these things, right? So the average American is not spending their days like, woo, bail? What's January? That'd be a good time to get criming. That's not what's going down.
I think that what it is there are so many people who want to cause unnecessary fear on social media, because let's face it, Twitter is a cesspool. It's always been a cesspool. But it's an easy place. All social media really is an easy place to stir up fear, stir up controversy, or use it at try and connect some kind of franchise or anything associated from a science fiction movie, say, oh, well, this is going to happen here, and it's going to be real life, and it's going to be just as bad. It's a way to, again, cause people to be divided and go into their own little talking points, and just say, well, this can never happen. Well, the thing is, what many Americans don't realize is that the prison system, it's designed to keep you behind bars. It's designed to treat you like an animal. And because of the war on drugs in particular, so many families and communities have been devastated. I have to compare it again to Prohibition. There's have you ever seen the series Boardwalk Empire, for example?
No.
Well, there's in season 3, I believe, there's 2 of the agents, the prohibition agents. They're talking about alcohol and how they're going to, again, hold people accountable. And one of the officers looks at his deputy or his assistant, says, there's no way we can ever arrest every single person. Everyone's breaking the law. And then in a follow-up, there's a scene in a courtroom where there's a judge, and he's just like a robot telling the people who had alcohol in their possession, pay $20 and get out. He's just telling everyone that when one of the main characters is about to be presented, the opposing side says, hey, Your Honor, this person right here, Nucky Thompson, he has an alcohol distribution center. He's one of the leading masterminds of so many cartels. And the judge stops the prosecutor and says, hey, look, I don't care anymore. I just don't care anymore. And this whole thing with the war on drugs, bring it back to that. It's never going to be won. It's never going to be this a great big victory where no one's doing drugs anymore.
But that's the problem with like accepting bad faith pretenses, right? Like, here's the thing: we know that that's not the purpose, right? We do this thing where we know we're being told, we're being given a pretense, we're being given a lie, we're being given like the mask, and we know that. And instead of just accepting what the actual objective is and how they're successfully accomplishing the actual exact objective, we beat ourselves over the head at how inconsistent, you know, it is with their stated objectives. They are not trying to save us from. If that's what they were going to do, they know what the answers are, right? People have drug issues, you get them into rehab. They would solve it the same ways that they solve everything with resource communities, the way that they solve everything with white people. They give them the resources that they need. We all know that the safest communities are not the most police communities. They're the communities with the most resources. We all know how you treat issues, how you would deal with a drug problem, how you would address these things, but that's not what it is, because the problem, what they're actually trying to treat, is exactly what they're policing, which is Black and brown people and poor people. That's what the actual goal there. So if your goal is actually just to find a system to continue to warehouse Black people, Black and brown people, to continue to keep this exploitative way that you use them for labor, to continue to make money off the backs of keeping these communities subjugated, they're doing that. They're doing it efficiently. They're doing it beautifully. They're doing it seamlessly, and they're doing it in plain sight. And they've turned their entire populace into people that champion it, that believe it is fundamentally necessary. So they're accomplishing what they want, which is why I kind of think something we need to start doing is, like, let them be responsible for their own mess. Like, in a sense, if I was telling you, if every day I was saying my room is dirty, my room is dirty, my room is dirty, my room is dirty, y'all would know, well, you live there. It's you doesn't clean the room. You dirty the room, right? So as the same way they're telling you to purge, to purge, to purge. Well, according to y'all always tell us Chicago is the purge, right? Like, according to y'all always are vilifying and making this place, making Chicago, making New York City, making these places out to be Gotham City. I've never heard you not paint them that way. So according to you, these dangerous, wild places have been like that. While they're constantly talking about us as an example for lawlessness, somehow that is completely divorced from the conversation and the fact that these are the areas that give more money to policing and incarceration than anybody else, right? So if it's a mess, who made the mess? Like, let's not even move on from that. Let's talk about the actual failures. At the end of the day, if there's only one approach we've ever taken, we've never taken any of our approaches. America has never decided, hey, let's decarcerate, let's rehabilitate, let's help, let's resource. We've never done that. All we do is mass incarceration and policing. So if you insist on saying, hey, the place is a mess, well, that's on you. Let's talk about how you have it a mess.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up, because usually on Fox News, my city in particular, Chicago, it's always vilified as it's a lawless Mad Max world, gun violence 24/7. Now, look, is there violence in Chicago? Yes, there is. But there's a reason why it happened. And what's always dismissed by corporate media, because Fox News, the way I see it, they're that kid in class that keeps on saying, aha, you have dirty shoes.
Yeah,
I get it. Okay. You're not saying anything new. What's being ignored, though, is that there are a lot of good people here in Chicago that are trying to fight for a better future. There are a lot of people here, organizations, individuals that are trying to make their communities a better place to live. What is usually overlooked by Fox News and other corporate media outlets is that, number one, we have the office of mayor, again, the previous mayoral administrations, but also aldermen too, that has systematically denied resources to the South and West Side neighborhoods in Chicago. And I mentioned before, Chicago is a hyper segregated city. The hyper segregation here in the city would even make Jim Crow maybe take a step back and say you're going too far, because it's been an ongoing problem since the foundation or the founding of the city.
Yeah.
And so many schools have been shut down. There's also, again, an ongoing crisis of lead in our drinking water. We have industrial racism happening here. We have environmental racism taking place on the South and West Side neighborhoods. And then on top of that, you know, if you ever get a chance to visit Chicago, start off on the north side, either using the Red Line or driving with friends, and go all the way down to the south side of Chicago. Yeah. And you're going to notice a drastic change in the environment, in the status of the buildings, how clean the streets are, and how many potholes your car is going to see, and eventually you're going to notice how the city abuses and abandons so many communities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what it is. But they'll never have a conversation about root causes, because at the end of the day, if you establish a system that the system's actual function is to punish and abuse people for things that for how they handle the circumstances that very system put them in the position of. In order to get people to champion that system, you have to make it those individual people's problem. You have to say it was there, they put themselves there. So if you acknowledge the way that the system has failed them, if you acknowledge the way that the system is stacked against them, the way the system itself is complicit in that, you would never actually champion the system punishing people for what the system has put them in, right? Like that would be absurd. So we start the analysis from this person, these bad people, these people and what they did, and we never have the conversation about everything that put them right there.
And while we are wrapping up the interview, there's 2 more questions. If you still have time, I would like to ask you.
Time.
Oh, fantastic. So then obviously I can go into this question right here. So on the show, like I said before, we're very critical of Democrats. Okay. I know what to expect from Republican lawmakers, but when we see in Washington, D.C. and various other states too, you see Democratic and Republican lawmakers working together hand in hand, siding with corporations, but we also see them siding and agreeing on creating police states, more funding for the police. And while before anyone types in the comment section below saying, oh, well, so what, you want to defund the police or you want to have there be no police at all? Look,
I do.
There is something that we need to bring up, and that is the police are getting military equipment. We covered on yesterday's show in the city of LA. There's now talk about authorizing drones, robots to shoot civilians.
Yeah.
Okay. We need to take a step back.
Yeah.
Maybe it's wrong for me to bring up a film like RoboCop, but I don't want to see Ed 209 on the street mowing people down.
Yeah.
There has to be bounds of reason. Okay, the police don't need a military drone shooting people. The police don't need armored tanks and military grade equipment to start shooting at civilians.
Absolutely.
So I want to ask you for your opinion on this. Are the Democrats complicit or willing to contribute to this ongoing police state and funding for more military equipment and more brutalization against working class communities?
Obviously. I listen. Obviously, I've always said, and I actually have a lot of pieces to this. I think my first Teen Vogue piece, I make this argument is I think it's a mistake to paint our problems with the criminal system or the ongoing expansion of the prison industrial complex and institutional and systemic racism against Black and brown and poor people as a Republican versus Democrat or blue versus red thing. That is just not true. I think everybody, and I don't mean this is never to be said as an indictment towards Dems, anybody, whites, everybody is actually far more aligned when it comes to a carceral nature than they think. That's Black people, that's brown people, that's all of us too, because we're all being indoctrinated in the same and educated in the same society that tells us that. That's what I was saying. Like, to me, there's a distinction between, you can get lots of liberals and lots of Democrats to think that you're completely on the same side of the fence because they are not, they are sympathetic enough to the video they see of a Black person being killed to not vilify that person or champion or, in the way that Republicans and the right will immediately galvanize around vilifying the victim, right? So they're with you there. But when it comes to actually all the underlying things that have made that possible, they're completely in alignment with that. Like, that's why I take a place like New York City. We have New York City, we had protests everywhere, every day in every borough, everywhere after George Floyd. And we still are a regularly activist protest. All this is the next thing. We have a Democratic mayor, Democrat governor, Democrat in every DA's office, Democrat on every council. And yet we are the ones, we put over $10.4 billion in NYPD. We give $860 million to Rikers every year. We continue to expand. And this is a place where you have Rikers that, despite the fact that New York City has 42% people identify as purely white in a city of 10 million people, Rikers is made up of over 90% just Black and brown people. So no, of course, absolutely, Democrats are complicit in it too. Yeah, absolutely, everybody is. I mean, my own mom is a moderate as far as I'm concerned.
Oh no, I'm so sorry about that. I'm trying to wake people
up. I'm working on her.
It's the way I would describe anyone that votes Democrat or Republican. It's just like they're in an abusive relationship and you got to get them out. Like, come on, take off the sunglasses. You're being lied to.
I can't give anybody grief. Let me tell you why. Well, one, I can't vote. I'm an immigrant, so I can't vote. I've never voted. And two, listen, I think for me on a responsibility level is I'm never going to be a person that says, oh, vote blue no matter what, because I do think there's a dangerous philosophy and if people do for you what they believe that they have to do. If they believe that you're going to vote and support them regardless of anything, they're not going to do for you. So I do think there is a dangerous element to the way, especially Black people are used as like cheerleaders for the Democratic Party, and we're supposed to go out and do all these things to, fight voter suppression, fight all these different things and get them elected, but yet they aren't actually meeting and responding to your needs. So I do think there has to be a greater demand or whatever placed in them. But I do think we have to me, if I want to be like a responsible human being, I need to galvanize. I need to spend some time outside of just election season. And like, if we're going to galvanize a third party or something like a third party and some people and some candidates and like really do that full time and encourage people to another outlet, then I got to do that. But if in the interim, in the right now, while I'm fighting these movements and I'm trying to, save bail reform and do all these little things to get me to a larger picture, to try to just keep some more people alive, maybe, decarcerate as much as I can, that often requires me to, at the very least, the Democrats are currently the lesser of two evils. So I can't blow down on people, especially me who can't vote and trying to figure it out. But I do think it is a mistake to think they are the champions of civil liberties, that they are, how people will look at electoral politics will never be the end all be all. Democrats will never be your ultimate saviors. They're establishment just like everybody else. But I do think as it currently stands, to me, present day, they are the lesser of two evils. Does that mean they're significantly the lesser of two evils? Does that mean they are not villains in and of themselves?
I've been told when it comes down to voting for lesser of two evils, and this is something I believe in, the lesser of two evils is still evil. And from my from everything I've seen covering 2016 election, 2018, 2020, this has caused a lot of my friends to kind of view me as like, oh, well, hey, you're just supporting Republicans. I'm an independent. I vote third party and I support ballot initiatives. I believe that the next step, it's not voting Democrat, and I sure as hell will never vote Republican.
Yeah.
Even though I know where they stand. I can respect an enemy being honest with me. If they're honest, I know, okay, great. You're gonna give me the middle finger, you're gonna spin my face. Good. I know that's to be expected from you. You're never going to care about the issues I care about. Great. When it comes down to the Democrats, it's lie after lie, broken promise after broken promise. And I feel that what we need to do as people is start supporting ballot initiatives. If you live in a ballot initiative state, support good ballot initiatives to bring in bail reform or make cannabis illegal at the recreational level, or fight for Medicare for all at the state level, and supporting independents and third parties and building movements and organizations not connected to Washington, D.C., because anything connected to the two-party system in D.C. opens itself up to be infected and corrupted and becomes a husk of what it used to be.
And I think that's a meritorious argument. That's the thing. Like, I think that argument is with merit, and I will never rally against it. Like, I got all the right answers and the know-how on this. I will say that from my perspective as a person that's every day, involved in these underground movements or trying to save bail reform in New York City, trying to do it in Chicago, XYZ. I know, like, let me put it to you this way. Eric Adams being the mayor is something that actually creates substantive problems, like things that I have to do and rally against and different things and initiatives that he does. In the same respect, I don't think Hochul, it's not like I don't like Hochul's politics or the foolish she does. She doesn't grant clemency. I don't think she champions bail reform. I don't think they do a lot of the things I would like them to do or anything right or support the things. But there's a certain way. If she had lost and Zeldin would have been in power, I can't. A nightmare. We would have a nightmare for bail reform. Absolutely, we would have more deaths. Rikers, 190,000% more people die. Bail reform is rolling back. More people are going to go to jail. Our carceral system is going to look very different in the interim. So I can't, me personally, individually, in good faith in these moments, pretend like it isn't going to be an actual difference right then. But I don't overall. That's the thing. It's like substantively, I do agree. I think there are dangers with a two-party system. I will never be someone that's like, you know what I mean? Champion for the Democrats, because like I said, I think they're very complicit in how we end up here. Because that being said, it's not like I think they ended up where they almost lost the Republicans because it was unfair. It's because they were out here pushing the exact same kind of dangerous rhetoric as the Republicans and not doing it well. They have Eric Adams and them behaving literally no different than the Republicans. So I acknowledge that is true. There are ways that each party mirrors each other and they have a lot of the same alignments, but they just have different, larger brand rhetoric that they put out there. But sometimes Democrats, Democrats will not care. They will not care like at all. And their neglectfulness sometimes is better for you in a particular moment in time than what is the actual active hatred the Republicans are coming by in this exact moment to do something. But I say that as only as a person from the role of being a present day organizer working on trying to save particular kinds of current movements, but not in the larger grand schema. I can't tell nobody what's the grand scheme thing they should be doing on voting or how they should approach it. And again, your girl can't vote.
So what I want to ask then is, how do we, because I think one of the ongoing problems that we have here, especially when it comes time to challenge a two-party system, and I say this not praising it, but corporate media, the Democratic establishment, and the Republican establishment. I mean, it's fantastic, and especially with social media, they're up in the ante so much more. If you have time, I would like to play this video. It's where the Black Panthers spoke with the Young Patriots. Now, obviously, it's kind of a historic meeting to see this, but just the words that they're speaking to each other still resonates today, because the problems that were in that era still exist now. Do you have time if I played that video?
Absolutely, go ahead.
All right, fantastic. I'd like to pull this up for all of our viewers and subscribers too. And and thank you again so much. We are appreciative of having you on our show as well. So let's play this.
This community meeting with the joint organization.
Panthers are here. Panthers are here. For Uptown. Okay. We come here with our hearts open. You cats to supervise us, where we can be of help to you. What do you want in your community? What do you want here? Are you afraid of you want to take berets off, man, or what?
There were a lot of suspicions about the Black Panthers, that they were gun-carrying terrorists.
It was a scenario that I had never been in before. I see some guys with Confederate flag patches. I was a little concerned.
The thing we got to deal with is concept of poverty, man. We got to erase the color thing. See,
the building's not fit for dogs to live in, but humans having to pay $144 a month for the thing. They sell the building, to new ownership. What we need is understanding among the people, coalition between the people to stick together and take them owners and put them over here in the lake somewhere.
Right on. Once you realize, man, that your house is funky with rats and roaches, same way a black dude's house is, once you realize that your brothers have been brutalized by the cop, the same way the west side and south side is, once you realize that you are paying taxes for the cops to whoop your ass, you're paying them, and you're paying them to kill you, and deal from there. The same thing's happening on the south
Bob
side.
Lee turned out to be quite an organizer. And he says, yeah, my name is Bobby Lee, but my real name is Robert E. Lee. And we all laughed. He said, you got to be kidding me.
Who's here that want to see this thing move? Yeah, man. Right on. Well, the first thing we talk about now is how we're going to organize. Where are we going to organize? And, we're all going to get run out of here eventually.
That was a good meeting. It was. It got everybody riled up.
I think that's interesting. Just again, how much the problems that happened in that era were still going on today. So
It's the same.
I think what I want to ask you then, because you're an organizer, you're on the ground. We're seeing everything impact, especially Black and Latino communities, but also again, what's also being ignored by corporate media. What corporate media has been doing is again working class white communities too that are also suffering from the same things too. And the thing is, how do we tear apart these barriers that the media has put up? Because the media and the two-party system will always say, well, you guys belong here. This community is better than that community. Don't work together. It can't happen. There's so much violence. Oh, you just got to trust the system, trust in us. Don't worry, where you're at is just fine. How do we break that narrative since it's been bombarded into so many generations' minds?
So all right, I guess I'm gonna leave on a hot take. I kind of wrote about this in one of my Olurin essays. But I think this is definitely an approach thing. I have pointed out before, and I've kind of alluded to that earlier, that I think a mistake is constantly thinking that the way out of these problems, or the way to actually shifting social consciousness, or to getting people to support the eradication of these institutions, is appealing to their sympathies. Like, we're always trying to appeal to white people's emotions and sympathies, and like trying to get them to feel sorry for what is happening. And there's a whole different kind of conversation to be had on how effective that is. I would reference or invoke a Stokely Carmichael that talks about America's lack of a conscience and how that has to be relevant to doing that. But what I really actually think is harmful to us is to be honest, a lot of the movements are on the ground movements, these organizations, these nonprofits, these, donors, these everybody on the side of the aisle, on the good side of the aisle, right, are a lot of white people that want to believe the best of white people. So all of their arguments, everything that they do is always, all of their messaging is couched as, hey, well-intentioned white folks, this is how we, sympathize with, let me tell you, let me trauma porn you, let me hear you the story, let me this, let me feelings this, blah, 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 because that's what they need to believe, but instead they would be better off, and I've said this, taking a class solidarity approach to actually, let me show you how this affects us too. We're actually united in this. It isn't about you doing for me, your neighbor, as an ally. It's about how this also benefits you and the collective as a whole. But they have I feel like, often a problem getting over their own like psychological hurdles of feeling like, that doesn't give them whatever absolution, whatever white guilt they're feeling. So they always approach it from that. But I actually think that is what is harmful for us. I do think we should have a class solidarity approach, but the problem is we have the right galvanizes around very actively. I know our side of the camp, we hate them. Forget other. I don't care what they're talking about. It doesn't matter what story, whatever sympathy that they go for. Forget them. And we're galvanized around that we're very invested in this white identity politics and what's happening. But then you have over on the side of the left, where it's like the left, the liberals, the whatever, the large encompassing side of this side of the aisle that is having a very like feelings thing. And the problem is there's only so much feelings a person can feel for another if you are consistently continuing to tell them that's still divorced from their collective reality, and you continue to feed to them that it's actually not to their benefit. Like, if we constantly play up white privilege rather than any level of class solidarity, what we continue to tell white people is, hey, you are better off in this current world. That your privilege, you're better off. But for feelings wise, I want you to be at a disadvantage to do what's better for us to create equity. The reality is your average person does not do what's not against what they feel like is not in their best interest. So it's a much better message to say, actually, it's in your best interest. None of us are better off in this current world. Let's see how we're all harmed, and it would be better that way. So that's what I think. I think it's a messaging and how that we're going about how we go about galvanizing support. So that's my hot take.
All right. I think we'll have that as a hot take. So one last question then for our viewers and subscribers, where can they go online to support your work? I know I have your website here, so I like to pull that up, but is there anywhere else where people can go?
Yes. Actively follow me on all social media at Miss Olurin. That's MSOLURIN. I would suggest you subscribe to my Substack, Olurinati, where I put out essays every month. I just put one out a couple of days ago. You can also watch a YouTube show that we're streaming now. It's called The Leftist Mafia. That's going to come out tomorrow. You can stream it on The Surfs, or I think The Humanist Report, at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. And we're going to talk about all the different issues and things. So that's where.
All right. That's a fantastic note to end it on. Olayemi, thank you so much for being on our show. We definitely invite you to come back on. And
yes,
obviously, there's going to be this 2023 city election that's going to be taking place. So grab a nice tasty snack and a tasty beverage, because this election, hopefully it will be something for the record books. Hopefully it'll be something in which maybe Chicago can get back on its own 2 feet. So again, if you're not following Olayemi on her social media, please do so. I will post that link again when we clip this video for our YouTube subscribers. Again, I want to thank all the moderators again for keeping the peace. My name is Kit. Peace to you guys, and let us all do what we can to build a better future. Take care, folks.